Well, long before Orlando, we planned to talk tonight about issues concerning the LGBTQ community. After all, it's Pride Month across the country, and weekend Pride events are coming up in both St. Louis and St. Charles. But now that Orlando is a hashtag, the conversation could go in a lot of different ways. Guns, mental health, FBI background checks, even ISIS. But we are sticking with the focus of issues concerning the LGBTQ community. Or maybe a better way to say it is issues concerning our community. Because even before Orlando, our guest tonight will likely say there was plenty to talk about. Now it just may be more urgent that we do so. So stay tuned.
Stay Tuned brings together local experts, journalists, civic leaders, and regular people to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Add your voice to our conversation, and you're at the table as we stay on top of current events and go deeper, bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. From the 9 network of public media in Grand Center, this is Stay Tuned. Solemn vows in City Hall. Those were the images framing last year's Pride Month in St. Louis and many cities around the country. With the Supreme Court ruling in favor of same-sex marriage, it looked to many like the LGBT community was gaining acceptance, and many hoped equality under the law. But this year, the images filling the country's consciousness are unspeakable, or at least they should be. The highest toll for a mass shooting in U.S. history, 49 killed, dozens more injured. Shooters have proven there's nowhere they won't murder. Movie theaters, grade schools, church services. Now a nightclub, a gay nightclub, where many say they come for the social shelter as much as any celebration. So now that a gunman has murdered in yet another formerly safe place, what happens next? Is Orlando a sign of how much hate for gays still lives? What does this year's Pride Month mean now? What do organizers, participants, allies hope to accomplish this month in the shadow of so much sadness? Is it time to mourn? Time to move forward? After all, even before Orlando,
I give you this ring,
as a sign of my vow.
And even with all of the I do's of the last year, many have advocated that there is still much more to do for true equality.
I'm happy to welcome to the table 4 guests tonight. Let me do some introductions here, starting with Jill Aul. She is the co-chair of Pride St. Charles and St. Charles PFLAG. You're the co-chair of St. Charles PFLAG, and you are with Pride St. Charles as well. Leon Braxton, the director of diversity and inclusion with Pride St. Louis, and St. Louis Black Pride vice president. Also Steve Brawley, founder, St. Louis LGBT History Project. Welcome to the table. And Kirsten Polovic, senior field organizer for Promo. I have to say, I couldn't help but notice that as that piece we just rolled, I think at some point each of you had to kind of turn away. It was like you couldn't watch it. Is that accurate?
Accurate.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So what has the last week been like?
It's been difficult. It's been really difficult. Because this is Pride Month, and it's typically a time of celebration. Pride festivals are rooted out of tragedy, the tragedy of the Stonewall riots, but they've evolved into one special day or one special weekend to really celebrate. And these killings in Orlando have just sent all of us reeling, those of us who are passionate about Pride and about the LGBTQ community.
I was thinking about, unfortunately we have kind of a baseline reaction to mass shootings that we can compare things to. It seems to me that this has been more personal for a lot of people. And gosh, you certainly don't want to go comparing shootings. That's not what I'm trying to say. But why? What did something beyond, was there something about where this took place that maybe not everyone understands what was violated here?
Well, for me, a bar has always been our safe haven. And it was, my personal story behind this was that I had just come home from Metro East Pride, and it was a great celebration. We have also a Pride celebration on the east side, and I had gotten home and just decided, well, before I get undressed and everything, I'm gonna watch TV. I turned on the TV, and there it was. and I just was devastated. I couldn't believe that the last sanctuary had been destroyed, because there were schools, churches, movie theaters, places where people would go to escape things. And in our community, the bar was a place where when you came out, that was the first place you went, because you knew there were like people there who would accept you for who you are. And to see that being destroyed was just, I just couldn't believe it. And so I just sat there for hours just watching the news unfold, and seeing 20, and I thought, okay, 20. Then when it jumped to 50, I cried. I just couldn't believe that our sanctuary had been destroyed and somebody had violated and killed people who were just there to have a good time. Because I didn't ever think it would happen in our community that way.
And then how quickly did you start thinking about the very specific planned events coming up here in our region? Where did your thoughts go?
I mean, I think kind of depending on the event and the different events that we look at, and Jill even explained it as well, this is Pride Month. This is a month that we all come together, members of the LGBT community, allies of the community as well. This is a time for celebration, and also to remember and celebrate the Stonewall riots, which were such a changing moment within the LGBT liberation movement, which was a response again to violence against the LGBT community. And to continue seeing a little over 40 years after the Stonewall riots, to continue seeing the violence that's still occurring against the community. And these are just two larger instances. Violence against the community continues every single day, unfortunately.
Well, let's talk about that. I had that lower on the list, but let's jump into that right now. You're the historian at the table. Give us the historical perspective, and let's talk modern day as well. Is there a violence that maybe a lot of people are unaware of, whether it's historical or contemporary?
I mean, a lot of people have asked me that, and I say it goes back to, Adam and Steve. I mean, violence against the LGBTQI community is from day one, and it goes on today. And so in our history project research, we can find files from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s of crimes that we've been able to locate, but we know that's just the tip of the iceberg of murders, assaults, robberies, you name it, that have occurred. And today we would call that a hate crime. Back then there wasn't a term for that. We have an evidence of a married man in Kirkwood who was murdered in 1955 for at lunch picking up a hustler. And so here's a married guy with kids who was murdered. And there was sort of this whisper about, well, we won't really say what happened, but everyone kind of knew what happened. But there's so many of those stories that have occurred over the years that are just hidden history. And so, yes, what happened was on a mass scale this past Sunday, but daily lives have been impacted throughout St. Louis and in America and the world that we'll just never know about.
Because a lot of people, did a temporary profile pic with a rainbow in it last year after the Supreme Court ruling, and thought maybe things had changed. And yeah, we did it. We've achieved equality.
But not all people have achieved equality, though. You're forgetting about the transgender community, because I think last year there were over 50 trans women murdered in the United States, and this year we're up to 14. And the same time that Orlando happened, there was a trans woman by the name of Diamond who was murdered, but no one really mentioned Diamond, and I specifically put Diamond's profile on my page and say, put a hashtag for her, remember her, as well, because this is not an isolated incident with trans women, especially trans women of color, being killed on a daily, sometimes 2 and 3 people in a day. So we don't want to forget those people that also have suffered and been murdered, viciously murdered. There was a video on Facebook about 6 months ago how a gentleman pulled up in a car and motioned for a trans woman to come over, and when she came over, they point blank shot her dead and then laughed about it.
And if I'm not mistaken, from our research this week, this is something that the FBI tries to track, but maybe doesn't do a great job, or there's a lot of underreporting. Is that fair, from what you're familiar with?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. There's underreporting, there's misgendering that the media occasionally does, and then there's also the point that some trans people, they're not able to live as their authentic selves because of their friends, because of their families. So there have been instances where trans people have been murdered, but we may not know that because their family didn't support them, their friends didn't support them. So we're not going to know. We're not going to know the statistics, and we're never going to be able to rightfully say the names and honor all of the lives that we've lost.
Okay, so take me back to the events that are planned coming up.
Okay.
St. Louis, St. Charles. How do you hold a party in light of what's happened?
And we also have Black Pride coming up in August.
And Black Pride in August. Okay, thank you. So the question remains: how do you move forward with what seems like a party?
You know, at the vigil last Sunday night in the Grove, I felt such a sense of solidarity. So many people showed up to grieve together and to just to be there and comfort each other. And I know I can speak for our planning committee for Pride St. Charles that spirit has absolutely pervaded our work this week. We're more determined than ever to provide a safe and meaningful and really enjoyable celebration for everybody, the community as well as the allied community.
Isn't that going to be hard to do?
It's hard to do, but I think it's so important to do that we're determined to do it, and I believe that we will do it. I think the St. Louis community especially comes together in the face of horrible tragedies like this, and I think that we're going to see that happen at all the pride events throughout the city in the next weeks and months. I think people, they just need to commune with each other, they need to get together, they need to hug each other and cry. I know for our festival we have incorporated some amazing ways to pay tribute to the Orlando victims. We're going to have an invocation and a moment of silence. We're going to ring a bell for each of the 49 victims. We have an art therapy activity that will be going on all day where kids and adults alike can decorate a heart and put a message on a heart that we're going to mail to a contact that we have in Orlando, who will then share them with the families of the murder victims there, things like that. But we also just feel like it's really important to keep focused on why we have this celebration in the first place, and that hasn't really changed.
Here's what was on Facebook from the reigning Queen of Pride, Andrea Andrews. We must not let the cowardly actions of others frighten us or bully us into being afraid. We must stand together and show strength in numbers, not just in times of tragedy, but in all times.
Absolutely.
What would you like to see Pride 2016? What should it look like?
It still should be the festival that it always intended to be. But it's just, we're going to make it a safer space, because that's all we know now. There's no such thing as a safe space. You just tried to make space safer. So we have added security. Some you will see, some you will not, because we don't want people, and certain aspects of our community have been so brutally beaten and treated so poorly by the police that they're scared of the police, and we still want those people to come and feel comfortable and safe at the festival. So we're just going to make it a safer space and just try to move forward and still celebrate and remember why Pride was started in the first place.
And the History Project will have exhibits and speaking times at all 3 upcoming Prides, and so there's a teaching moment of, yes, this just happened the other day, or this horrible thing, but there's a long history that maybe folks may not know about, both the good and the bad that have happened in the LGBTQ community. So, we'll have some displays that we're putting together just for these, for St. Charles Pride. We're going to have a History of Hate exhibit, which is like, headlines, showcasing some of the really bad things that have happened to the community over the years, but not to be a Debbie Downer, but it's a reality. But then to celebrate the fun things that have happened and the positive things that have happened. So a real mix of celebration, but also a teachable moment.
And one thing we have learned over this past week is that, yes, we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go.
Specifically?
Just with tolerance. And just tolerance, because I always say that education is our greatest weapon in this war against intolerance. Because we have to educate people, because there are still people out there that send their kids away to camp to pray the gay out of them. There are still trans women who are killed every day just for being them authentic selves. There are LGBT youth that get put out of their homes from religious families because they believe they're going to go to, Hades because they're gay.
And we still have legal discrimination in the
can
state of
still lose our
Missouri.
jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because legislative there might be a long way to go. Not to interrupt, but you can be fired for being gay in Missouri and a few other states.
And absolutely, and kind of going to your point earlier about marriage equality, because again, that was definitely one of the steps in the right direction when it comes to the LGBT rights movement, the liberation movement. But again, as I mentioned, there are so many steps that we have to still go through. As you mentioned, in the state of Missouri, you can still legally be fired for being gay or trans. But you can also be denied housing. You can also be removed from public accommodations. This past legislative session alone, we saw 16 anti-LGBT pieces of legislation that got introduced. Legislation that was directly targeting LGBT couples, same-sex couples in Missouri, from having their marriage recognized, from being able to get married, and then also 6 anti-transgender restroom bills, which would infringe upon the rights of transgender individuals to be able to use the restroom that most closely associates with their gender identity. So even though marriage equality was one policy step towards the right direction, there are still so many more policies that need to be implemented, and then also so much more education and that building up of tolerance and that ending of the stigma that would stop a lot of these really anti-LGBT bills as well.
That some couch as religious freedom bills, as the SJR 39, I believe, was last year. Are those fights over? There was some very emotional testimony from perhaps what some might have considered some unlikely sources, Republicans who weighed in and essentially stopped that bill. Are those fights done, or are those concerns that you still have?
Never over.
No, it's very much a concern.
Yes.
I know out in St. Charles County, we actively went canvassing just last Saturday in St. Peters, and there are, actions being taken all around our county as well, and a lot of concern because it's not fair and it's not right.
It's hot political season, God's, guns, gays. Missouri has a history of that sort of mentality, and it's it's before the shooting it was very active, and there might be a little moment now of, oh, let's all be sympathetic, but I don't think any of us at this table believe that that's got to last more than a hot minute, that as this election continues, the hate will continue. We're seeing it you see it on YouTube, you see it on Facebook. When the Columbine kids were killed and when the Newtown kids were killed, you didn't hear anyone ever say, oh, kill more. That's what we're hearing on social media and seeing on YouTube.
Well, those two pastors had those videos saying that
Absolutely.
the gays got what they deserved. Kill more of them. Kill more of them. And fortunately, YouTube took those down because you can't just spew that kind of hate and not have people follow up on it.
Is some of the atmosphere a consequence of what some would see as progress? Others, it also is a spotlight. Does the Supreme Court ruling, while it may look like progress on the surface, does it also put a community in the spotlight and bring others into the light who are not sympathetic?
Well, of course it does, because anytime you take a step forward, you're always going to have people that don't want, like, okay, so the gays now have marriage equality. What are we going to do so they don't get anything else? And that's how people attack. And you can always tell, like Steve said, you can always tell when it's an election cycle because we become targets during the election.
And the transgender bathroom bills, that's all that is.
That's all that
It makes me think too of Kim Davis, who immediately,
Right.
even as soon as that ruling was made, she almost immediately refused to issue the marriage licenses in Kentucky. So,
Speaking of the kind of the tone and the atmosphere of some of the events that you might, let's go to Twitter. This was from Steve Givens. He says, how about instead of moments of silence, we have moments of screaming enough, as loudly as we possibly can.
If it's the Steve Givens I know, he's a friend of mine, and it sounds like Steve, and I and applaud him. I mean, absolutely. I would hope that all of us, young, old, any color and race, would use this as a rally cry. I mean, I'm not saying that folks have become complacent in the victory over the last year, and thank God we had that wonderful celebration. But this year, it's that balance now of of the celebration and now remembrance, but a call to action. And what does that look like? I don't think we know yet.
Right.
But it is an important election year, so hopefully that call to action will
And
to vote and to get out there and to do what you can to protect your rights.
Like, we have to come together as a community. Our theme this year is solidarity and pride, and that it's we didn't know all this was going to happen, and it's so relevant at this time that we as a community, if 3,000 people can come together in a tragedy, why can't 3,000 people come together and support and rally as a community and get something done? And the way we can change the legislation and change the atmosphere is for people to get out and vote and to get out and share our stories and share our love. And I think in our community we need to probably stop some of the infighting that we have and just come and support and love one another.
The 3,000 people you're talking about is the crowd that packed the Grove Sunday night.
We have the very first we have the nation's very first transgender memorial garden. It's in the Grove.
Were you surprised to see 3,000 people on a moment's notice?
Yes. I was.
And one message that I know that I think a lot of us and a lot of community members out there have been saying that even once all the vigils are over, even once we're done with kind of the planned gathering of people getting together, it doesn't stop there. You can still, especially to allies in the community as well, like you can continue showing up, continue to educate your friends, your family. Speaking of the trans community as well, whenever it is the Transgender Day of Remembrance and we're memorializing the lives of these people that have been lost, show up to that. Say their
awesome
names.
To have 3,000 people at G-Door. It would be
Absolutely.
awesome for that.
So continue to show up even after that, continue to show up after these vigils and continue to do work.
So sticking with the point you're making there from Twitter, this is Megan who tweeted, Pride Month is a public reminder that the LGBTQ community will not be pushed into the shadows by fear and bullies and that there is an army of allies backing them. Do you believe that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So expand on what you just said there and the rest of you as well. You know, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. What should allies know that we don't, or would you like to be part of the discussion?
Well, PFLAG is an allied organization. We're parents, families, and friends of LGBTQ people. I'm the president of the St. Charles chapter, and I can tell you that in any civil rights movement, it's the allies who help move things forward, because when you're talking about a minority population, you know, they just don't have the numbers and the power to get things done. So I really think it's all about the allies.
Was there something that you didn't know that you do know now that you try to share with other people?
You know, it just comes right down to the fact that love is love and that we're all people and that LGBTQ people didn't make a choice. They're, you know, they are who they are, they're awesome, and they deserve respect and they deserve fairness and love. It seems like such a simple concept, but it's so difficult for so many people.
What would you like to be in this conversation, not just this one, but the larger conversation that is not?
The understanding, compassion, and love of our community, because it all goes back with me. It all goes back to education and understanding. Because if you don't know what you don't know, and if you sit down and you talk to people and you communicate, you open those channels and have those dialogues, then at least you get to understand. You get to explain to people and educate people. Because I think a lot of people react because they're scared of things they don't know.
It's the changing hearts and minds, and which one comes first, and do you change the mind first or the heart? And sometimes if you change the heart, the mind will shift, and so it's that balance of you kind of try to meet people where they're at and say, okay, let's learn about this together, and then hopefully one of those minds or hearts will change. You're not going to do it all the time, and it's sad. You're going to feel like, man, I wish I could have, you know, broken through, but you can't let that one setback keep you from going to the next person and trying that relationship. And it's really,
Just keep moving forward.
We have one-on-one. It's a long slog. It's, you know, it's not a, you know, it's a lifetime of work for all of us.
We talked at the beginning of the show how, you know, we can compare this. This story of the past week could go in a lot of different directions, and we can kind of unfortunately compare it to other mass shootings, where oftentimes there is a lot of outpouring of support. There's anger, there's debate, there are vigils, and then we kind of forget and move on. Do you worry that this will be the case with Orlando? Whether it be the topic specifically of the shooting or the other issues that have been raised here tonight is what I'm really talking about.
I know from my end, and kind of speaking from, because I identify as straight, I don't identify as trans, I identify as an ally to the community, and I know kind of my fear is making sure that, again, even once all the organized vigils end, even a week, 2 weeks later, a month later, that we remember to keep coming together and keep fighting for the LGBT community. It does not stop here, and we need our allies to be able to come forward and to be able to continue this work.
We have just a couple of minutes left. Give me any highlights you would like us to know about the actual events coming up, things that you would want people to know. This is
Saturday, at the 370 Lakeside Park in St. Peters from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. We have a big children's area with inflatables and karaoke and art projects. We have all day long entertainment. We're going to have 2 weddings taking place throughout the festival. We have 12 food trucks and a beer garden that will be open from 3 to 7. The weather forecast looks phenomenal. So we have extremely tight security, but it will be subtle to the average fairgoer. So everybody is urged to come on out this Saturday at the 370 Lakeside Park in St. Peters.
quickly, any other plugs?
Don't forget Pride St. Louis coming up June 24th through the 26th. We have art walls, we have a children's area, we have a wonderful entertainment lineup. Steve is going to come and do a history talk for us. We have some educational seminars. It's not all about the party, it's all about community.
Downtown?
Downtown, Soldier Memorial.
Because it's growing.
Yes, it's. Yes.
And the parade on Sunday.
And the parade let's not forget the parade, yes. The parade on Sunday, and right before the parade, we're going to have something called Hands Across Market that I'm working on, where we'll pay tribute both to the Orlando victims and the 14 trans women that have been murdered this year.
The History Project promotes the preservation and recognition of local LGBT history. Our website is St. Louis LGBThistory.com, and we have great resources for those in the community to learn about our history.
Jill, Leon, Stephen, and Kirsten, thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. We cut you off. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good. Give your money to promo.